Hi, my name is Steve, and welcome to Christianity Out Loud. Thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Wherever you're watching, be it YouTube, be it Rumble, be it Locals Community, hello to everybody over there and everybody everywhere. Thanks for watching and tuning in, although I've said that already. It's the second week in a row I've done a brilliant job at an introduction, but you know, that's the way it is. I'm not going to go and start it again and make it perfect, because if it's perfect, it's not quite authentic, and this is very much not perfect, but I would hope that you could see it is at least authentic. So, hey, if you like what's going on here, why don't you hit the like button or the Rumble button or the thumbs up on Locals, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. That'd be greatly appreciated. Actually, before we dive into what's been on my mind this week, just regarding the book there, I've got an interview actually on a radio station coming up regarding the book, which should be good. It's an American radio station, which once I could remember the station, I would tell you. But once it's once it's been done, I'll put the link up everywhere. It's being broadcast, many places, many people, hopefully having a listen. So that'll be interesting. It should be a good time. Should be a fun time. Should be a good experience. So that book is still available. The link, of course, it's still available. I don't know why I said that. The link is below, so if you want to go check that out, go check it out. I reckon it was a pretty good effort for my first book. I had really good feedback from everybody who's read it, so it's always a good thing as well. It's also available Amazon, a few other places, so just if you don't want to have a look at the link, just Google search book and my name, and that'll come up. So there's that. So, yeah, that interview is taking place on the 4th of March, Friday, 4th of March. So, should be good. But into this week's weekly word. A fair bit going on this week. We've got Russia and Ukraine. We've got Joe Biden and the Ukraine, but mention that. China and Taiwan. That's an interesting scenario. We've got the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and a whole heap of truck drivers, which is an interesting scenario. I don't know why he seems to be persisting with what he's persisting with, but each to their own, I guess. I'm sure there was an easier way out. But that aside, I'll stick local with this one. Well, mostly local. There's a couple of sources from overseas, but stick local. So, but could be applicable across the board. Seems that we've all, regardless of where we are, at least in the Western world, we seem to have gone through the same 2 years as each other. So the question that I would like to ask is, now that governments are starting to wind back their restrictions, was it all worth it? Was from March 2020 through to end of February 2022, was that period of time worth it? Are we, as a society and a culture, are we better? Are we more evolved? Are we more civilized? Are we more tolerant than, I don't know, say the end of 2019? Possibly a leading question, but state borders here in Australia closed. Cannot pass. In direct contravention, mind you, of the Australian Constitution, which says states shall not forbid free travel between the states, but they did, and who knew that decision was going to be upheld by the High Court of Australia. People stranded away from their homes for months, locally and internationally. Fear, loathing, and not Las Vegas for all of you movie buffs out there. See, one of the problems, I think, if I look at somewhere like the US, somewhere like, say, Florida, that when their governor took an educated opinion and took the opinion that he didn't know, and then surrounded himself by a variety of experts, educated himself, made the decisions that, you know what, I'm just going to let people do their thing, and they've been fine. Schools are open, economy's open. You want to get a vax, go get it. You want to wear a mask, go do it. We won't force you to do anything. It'll be fine. Businesses are flourishing. School children haven't missed out. Compare, say, Florida to, I don't know, say Victoria. See, none of that. Yeah, fear, loathing, and not Las Vegas. Get myself sidetracked. Fear, fear of everything. Fear of everything. Fear of everyone. Fear of every public place and public space and public circumstance. And if I'm driving on my own, in my own car, I must wear a mask because of fear. And not necessarily just fear of virus, fear of sickness, but fear of government. I don't know whether that's a good place to be. Loathing of anyone not covering their face with a piece of cloth. Anyone holding to the radical idea that a medical treatment should be, I don't know, an individual choice. I wasn't aware that so many scientific and medical experts existed, and particularly of all places on social media, because doctors have got nothing better to do than post all over Facebook. It's funny. I was listening to an interview with Charlie Kirk, and if you know who he is, if you don't, you can go and look him up yourself. I don't particularly follow him per se. I don't know too much about him. Things I've heard him say seem reasonable, but I'm not an avid follower of his as such. But yeah, he made a very interesting point, and rather than claim it as my own, all credit to him, and I'll do my best to remember it and paraphrase it, and probably not do it as eloquently and articulately as he did. But his point was, we've come out of this, and it's been, trust the science. You don't trust the science. You're not following the science. What does that actually mean? I mean, there is science, and then there is science. There is science, which is what we know. Laws of gravity, laws of thermodynamics, laws of thermodynamics. I'll get my teeth and tongue in the right place. Laws of inevitable decay, E equals mc squared. All of that, we know all of that exists, right? And then we've got what we don't know. So we didn't know how this was going to transmit. We didn't know how many people were going to die. We didn't know, how many people were going to get sick. We didn't know about all of those things. But to say, you're not following the science now seems to have equated this idea that if you're not prepared to wear, 3 face masks while you're having a bath, if you're not prepared to do that, you're at war with Einstein. I mean, that's the state that we're at, and that's the point that he made far more eloquently than I just did. But I take his point. And so fear, loathing, and self-righteousness. A comparison to a certain prominent political party fairly active in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. I don't want to mention the name because the comparison is made far too often. I think you know who I'm talking about. But these ideologies, they start by othering a group of people. By saying, oh, you are the others. Calling it a pandemic of the unvaccinated, for example. Othering a group of people, calling for their social and cultural ostracization, the introduction of what is essentially a social credit type system, showing papers before you enter a restaurant or a cafe or any sort of venue. Yeah. And finally, a headline from the, granted, Washington Times, but that's why I used the Washington Times. Lockdowns had little or no impact on COVID-19 deaths, a new study shows. And that study is from, all places, Johns Hopkins University, or at least the people who are associated with Johns Hopkins University. Quoting from the article, we find no evidence that lockdowns, school closures, border closures, limiting gatherings have had a noticeable effect on COVID-19 mortality, the researchers wrote. But the research paper said lockdowns did have devastating effects on the economy and contributed to numerous social ills. Well, they have contributed to reducing economic activity, raising unemployment, reducing schooling, causing political unrest, contributing to domestic violence, and undermining liberal democracy. The report said such a standard benefit-cost calculation, or said cost-benefit, but benefit-cost calculation leads to a strong conclusion. Lockdowns should be rejected out of hand as a pandemic policy instrument, the paper concluded. Just before I move on to my next sort of thing, I was listening to another podcast, and the point was raised that why mandate, say, a vaccine for something like COVID. And the point was raised, the question was asked rather, what if it's Ebola that has, say, a 50% mortality rate? Should we mandate a vaccine for that? And that was conceded as a very good point, but countered with, if something like Ebola or whatever is seen to have unequivocally, can be demonstrated by simple statistics, not twisting and playing around with words. See last week's weekly word. If you can actually see clearly that something has a 50% mortality rate, then you probably don't need to mandate that people get treatment for it, do you? Because they'll all line up and get it. Because if it's a 1 in 2, as opposed to a 1 in 1,000, I'll have links posted below that takes you to various journal and news articles that, examples of the impact that these lockdowns had on businesses in general. But I'll also tell you a personal anecdote. This is going back, 6 months or so. It was a few hours rather, before the lockdown that occurred here, at least in southeast Queensland, in August of last year. And my wife had my son at a birthday party, because lockdown was 4 p.m, so anything up to 4 p.m. was obviously safe, and you couldn't catch COVID. I digress. Point being, they're at a play centre which had, I think, a Baker's Delight franchise in it. And my wife, being the kind person that she is, thought, I'll go and buy some food from this person, franchise owner, and help him out. Grab some food for morning tea for the next couple of days, because we're in lockdown, we can't go anywhere anyway. And the owner practically begged her to take more away, just kept giving her food, because if people didn't take it and buy it, it was going to be thrown away. Health regulations dictated that food can't sit there for, at that point, it was an unspecified length of time. This guy still has got electricity to pay, he's got rent, there are other overheads associated with costs in running a business, and no income for, in this case, a week. The bills still roll in. Where's the benefit of a lockdown for him? It's perfectly fine if you're the Chief Health Officer of Queensland earning just over $600,000 a year being paid for by a taxpayer, and you're probably not real worried about your income if you're a high-earning public servant. If you're a small business owner, it probably matters. Headline from an article written by Joe Hildebrand, who I've quoted from before. I think I might be admiring a little bit. I said last time, admiring is the wrong word. Agreeing with what he has to say is a better way of putting it. I didn't know much about him, but still don't know much about him, but he seems to be, at least I'm agreeing with him. Doesn't mean he's right, it means we're in agreement. Headline, I'll get to the point, shall I? End of restrictions exposes senseless COVID scaremongering. The hysterical headlines have receded, and all the catastrophic predictions were wrong. The results could not be any clearer. And I will post that link below as well. So, a fair bit of reading if you're going to follow through with the links. I've quoted from the Australian Bureau of Statistics before. That was only for 2020. Well, some numbers for 2021 have come out. And they make for what I think are some interesting reading. And I'll repeat my question, knowing what we now know about the effect that lockdowns have, which is negligible at best. Was it worth it? Some statistics. So, from the moment this pandemic began, the deaths where people died with or from, note that little subtle change of language, this is up to the 31st of January 2022, 2,639. Now, before you accuse me of anything, it's 2,639 deaths too many. I'm not a fan of anybody dying from, let's say, a preventable illness, okay? Or generally anybody dying before you would consider it their time, right? The average annual number of deaths due to influenza between 2015 and 2019, 2,908. That's the average annual deaths. Total COVID deaths, 2,600. The median age of males who died from COVID in Australia, 81.2 years of age. Coincidentally, the median age or median life expectancy of a male in Australia is 81.2. There you go. The median age of females who died from COVID, 86. Bang on, 86. The female life expectancy in Australia, 85.3. So was that worth it? Was the past 2 years worth it? All of this. I mean, we have a problem already in society with children being addicted or having addictions, increasingly becoming addicted to electronic devices. So, what better way to solve this than locking them in their own homes, conducting school online and have them stare at a screen all day? Was it worth it? And where was the church? Possibly my biggest gripe or frustration. I've spoken on this before. You can go back and check, and my view's been consistent since March 2020. Churches should not close. They should tell government, no, not do it. Separation of church and state, no, you have no jurisdiction here. You do not tell us to close. They should have stayed open. Christians, in my humble opinion, take it or leave it, should have been advocating for freedom from the beginning. This is something that one side of culture and society has just got wrong. No point messing around. They're about individual freedom and liberty when it comes to choosing the person they want to marry. About individual freedom and liberty about choosing to abort a baby. I have a big problem with that. There's individual liberty surrounding the choice of euthanasia. I have a philosophical objection to that, but ultimately, as an adult, you can make your own choice. The issue of individual freedom and liberty when it comes to being able to choose your own gender and your own identity. But there's no individual choice and liberty when it comes to medical treatment. Freedom. Freedom from the beginning. This period of time may have provided churches with a new way of communicating with people, a new way of reaching people via technology. But is that really what we should be about? We can gather for church online. A community is a community, and a community only works and a community only survives if it continues to be a community, commune, together. I don't think the last 2 years has been worth it. Not for that number of deaths. And don't accuse me of saying I want anyone to die or I don't care. No, not true. But the closure of schools, for example, if we're going to say we're going to close schools because this virus could hurt our children, okay. You and I can have an argument. Debate, rather than an argument. We can debate that. Okay? Because that's about protecting children. And that's something I'm very much in favour of. But when we change that argument to we're going to close schools and force children to stay home because they could kill their grandma, that's a very different moral standpoint. The first one, okay, I can understand that. The second one's a very different moral standpoint. And they should not be argued as if they are the same. For example, or as an example, where was the grandparents' choice in all of this? I don't think this has been worth it. And I think people should be held accountable for the past 2 years. I really do. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. And I'm fully understanding of the fact that it probably won't happen. Someone like Premier Daniel Andrews in Victoria probably won't be held to any serious account. the Victorian opposition is not holding them to account. It's the same here in Queensland. I think the state government should be held accountable for the decisions that were made. The state opposition is nowhere. The state opposition is not standing up for small business. It's not standing up for individual rights, individual freedom, the idea of choice. They're not. They're just not. So, I'll leave you with some paraphrasing from Galatians 5. I may have quoted from Galatians 5 before. If I have, that's because it's good. Quote from Galatians 5 again. For complete and utter obedience and adherence to government authority, Christ has set us free. Sorry, it doesn't say that. I'll be sensible. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. You were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion is not from him who calls you. Now the works of the flesh are evident. Idolatry, government, chief health officer, wear a mask, go get jabbed, social distance, and bracket. Fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, masks, gatherings, vaccines, etc. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. And on that, let's not jump up and down and really thank the government for removing a restriction that arguably shouldn't have been there to start with. Look, you now no longer have to wear masks. Okay, thank you. Your call. And on that uplifting note, until next week, God bless.